Okay, so the second argument against free trade is sort of a domestic market failure theory. And here, what I want to present is the most intuitive of the domestic market failure arguments, and that would be the infant industry argument. And the basic idea is that a country has an industry that is just starting out and they will have a comparative advantage in the future if they are able to grow up and mature. Okay, so this is basically an economies of scale argument. Right? And in such, it's a response to the additional benefits argument from before. Okay, so it's a response to the additional benefits argument from the free trade side. Okay, and here the idea is that there exists an industry within a country that is just starting out, but they're relatively small. Okay, so it's a one-man operation in a backyard or something, or maybe a dozen people working to assemble cars or something to that effect. Okay, and they would be really good, given the natural resources that exist, given the infrastructure that exists in the country, or given, whatever things exist in the country, if that industry were able to develop and grow such that it could expand its output and produce at a more efficient level, then they would actually be, the world's best producers of that good. Okay, so because this industry is just starting out in this country and it's established in other countries, this industry will never be able to take off and succeed because they'll always be undercut by foreign producers. Okay, so let's think of, maybe Haiti, or let's say would one day be the best car manufacturer on the planet. Okay, but today, if Haiti were to get into the automotive industry, the U.S., Germany, India, Japan, etc., would all just crush them. Okay, and so as a result, any Haitian automotive company will go out of business very quickly because they're unable to compete with the likes of Ford, GM, Chrysler, Mercedes, Yamaha, and every other motor company in the world. Okay, and so the argument here is we can use tariffs to protect these industries or these firms from foreign, more developed firms, right? And in doing so, they are able to grow and eventually compete on their own. Okay, so that's the basic idea, is that, if we were to somehow protect, if Haiti were to somehow to protect their car industry, and again, as always, I'm making up the specific examples. I'm just trying to give you something that you can, use to think about this rather than just showing you numbers and math and everything. Okay, so if Haiti, let's say Haiti would have the best car manufacturer on the planet someday, if their industry were allowed to grow, but they can't grow because the U.S., Germany, China, Japan, India, etc., would just crush them. So if Haiti used tariffs to protect their domestic car manufacturers, then the Haitian car industry would be able to develop, and one day we could remove those tariffs, or Haiti could remove those tariffs, and then the company would be able to compete on the global market on its own and not be immediately driven out of business. Okay, so that's the domestic market failure argument. Okay, now the primary users of these kinds of tariffs are developing countries. So for the most part, this is used by developing countries who are basically copying existing production techniques or practices. Okay, so these industries, they tend to use them as a means of protecting their existing their developing industries. And what they're doing is, and the reason why they need the protection is because for the most part, they're just copying what the bigger companies are doing, but at a much smaller and therefore a much more expensive on a per unit basis scale. Okay. Now, there are a couple, so in the interest of fairness, and since we critiqued the terms of trade argument, I want to present the response to this one as well. Okay, so there are a couple problems with this. So first off, is we need to ask the question of who is in the best position to judge whether an industry has the potential to grow up. Okay, whether an industry, so this should be a new industry. Okay, so who is in the best position to judge whether a new industry has the potential to grow up? Well, that will be the industry leaders, right? These people, they know a lot about the industry. They're the ones that are actually on the field doing it every single day. And they're going to be the ones that know best whether or not the industry has the potential to grow up into something much bigger than what it currently is, and to eventually develop into something much more robust. But the problem is that these people have a strong incentive to misreveal the information. Okay, as we're all aware, statistics lie, or what's the phrase? There's three types of lies, right? There are lies, there are damned lies, and statistics, right? If these industry leaders are the ones generating the statistics, well, then they could generate statistics that argue that their industry is an infant industry and it needs protection. But all they're doing is trying to argue, right, that there ought to be a tariff on their industry. tariff, and increasing their producer surplus, right? And there's no argument about the efficiency there. It could very easily be the case that this is all they're trying to accomplish is increasing their producer surplus, right? And if they're the ones generating the statistics, that could very easily be the case that they would misreveal the information in such a way that supports the claim. Okay, so there's a potential problem there. And then the second problem, okay, so this is sort of an incentive problem, right? The second problem is that the infant industry might not ever grow up. Okay, so this is like, if you have a 20, let's say a 28-year-old living in his parents' basement, right? Because, he's got free rent and free food, he'll never actually, have an incentive to grow up and move out on his own, right? Because why would he? Mom and dad are paying for all his things. Life is great. You got no responsibilities. You have no financial duties to pay for your own things. You got free everything basically, right? And so that person might not ever grow up. In the same way, the infant industry might keep themselves from growing up. They might not develop fully to the point where they could actually be on their own. They might stay just below the level of development that would allow them to compete on the global scale and thereby just keep collecting the benefits from being protected from the foreign competitors, right? Or they might say, we're not grown up yet. We need to keep having our allowance, right? That might be a potential problem. So in theory, it might work, right? And in theory, it might be a thing that's true, right? But there are strong critiques of it in the sense that the people who know whether or not the industry has the potential to grow up, well, they might use some statistics to misreveal the truth a little bit, and they might actually just never grow up in the first place, right? And so the infant industry argument and the domestic market failure argument itself, there is some truth to it, but there is also complications that we need to be cognizant of before we run off and say that they are, objectively true always and everywhere. And this is where the case-by-case basis comes in, where you have to sit down and think, are these people misrevealing the truth? Are they genuinely going to try to grow up and develop on their own? If both of those things are, if it's the case that they are telling the truth and that they're going to grow up, maybe there's some validity to the infant industry argument, right? But if the leaders are lying and if they're going to keep themselves, below a level of development that would allow them to compete, then the infant industry argument becomes destructive and not productive.